President Donald Trump signing an order to impose new trade penalties against Canada, Mexico, and China. As First Alert 6's Philip Katafamo shares, the full impact of these new penalties are unknown, but for one family-owned Omaha business, they're already feeling the effects.
Newly enacted tariffs are set to begin on imported goods from big U.S. trade partners and competitors. A 25% tariff for goods from Mexico and Canada, along with a 10% tariff for China. Professor Ernie Goss of Creighton University believes the new penalties are part of a bargaining chip.
And the threat is to encourage onshoring and encourage companies to move back from China, to move back from Mexico, move back from Canada into the U.S. But thus far, they've not been successful.
The Trump administration say the tariffs are in place to stop the spread of fentanyl and add pressure to Canada and Mexico to limit illegal immigration into the United States. Along with higher prices on goods from those countries, Professor Goss believes the tariffs could cause retaliation. Countries could increase tariffs on U.S. goods, which might raise the cost of living.
For Nebraska, it's particularly important. Mexico is the top nation to receive our corn, for example, our agricultural exports. So that's very important. If we see barriers to that trade with Mexico, that would spill right back into the Nebraska economy and even spill over, of course, into the Omaha economy.
While the full extent of the tariffs is not yet known, that spillover might already be in effect. Sarah Carino, manager of Selena's Market near Midtown, says some imported goods are getting expensive.
Avocados prices went up already. Eggs, the milk, most of the dairy products, they went up. A lot of some of the vegetables, limes went up too, mangoes, We got a lot of them that went up.
Carino says canned items and merchandise come from Chicago, but a lot of their products, including fresh produce, are from out of the U.S. If prices continue to rise, not only would it drive customers away, it could shut down the store. For now, Carino is thankful the community has continued to show its support.
Thanks to God first, and thanks to the people that come in and buy something, lime, buy a vegetable, buy something. Everything little by little keeps growing, We are a strong community, and if we all keep strong, we will survive.
In Omaha, I'm Philip Katafamo, First Alert 6.
The Associated Press reports those tariffs are expected to take effect on Tuesday. We'll be sure to first alert you to new information as we receive it.